Thank you guys all for being here. Our ideal dinner party. And I'll introduce our panel first. If you just want to wave your hand that you're here, and then we'll get into our panel today. So we have Chris Austin in Seattle, the Senior Vice President of Global Sales and Marketing for Seaborn. Hi.
Hi.
We have Elliot Ferguson, the CEO of Destination DC, who's also the national chair of the U.S. Travel Association, which really promotes and supports tourism as hugely important in the U.S.
Hello.
We have Brett Armitage, the chief commercial officer at Kerzner, which includes Atlantis and One and Only Resorts in Dubai. And then we have Denise Jackson, the president and co-owner of Balboa Travel, which is a $250 million agency in San Diego. So thank you for being here, Denise. And then from Afar, we have our executive editor, Jeremy Saum, who's just outside of San Francisco, and then Ellen Asmodeo, our executive vice president and chief revenue officer for Afar. So some of us are starting to travel again or plan our next trips. We're not all sitting in our houses like we were 6 weeks ago, and we're slowly emerging and trying to be responsible citizens and travelers, but also support our industry, which so desperately needs it. So, for me, if air bridges open up as expected in the UK, allowing us to travel without quarantine, I'll be going to Spain in a couple of weeks. And I have trips planned to Switzerland and to Italy, as well as around England, including the Cotswolds. So, at the same time, the pandemic isn't over, but I'm still looking at the positive things happening, right? So a month ago, there were all of these news stories, and we didn't expect the European borders to be opening this soon. So they have, and we haven't seen any significant uptick. So while the news is not a fun place to live, there are some good things happening for our industry, and that's what I'm choosing to focus on. So with that spirit, I'd love to open with Jeremy to talk about our next issue, which focuses on hope and recovery.
Thank you, Annie. It's great to be with you all today. I think these gatherings have really been helpful to all of us as we try to navigate these challenging times with so many unknowns and the news changing so quickly. As a company at Afar, we've really leaned into our digital coverage to keep our audience informed of every twist and turn of the news and how that affects them as travelers. But we're also really excited about putting out our next issue. First of all, it'll be great to get a break from a screen. As someone who's worked in print for a long time, I hope all of these Zooms are reminding us how nice it is to relax with words and pictures on paper. Little plug for print there. But the other thing the magazine lets us do is take a step back from the daily whiplash and think bigger and more broadly about where travel is headed. So our next issue will be focused on, as Annie said, hope and recovery. It's going to be a special issue in that it won't follow the usual format that we've been publishing for the last few years. It'll be made up of 3 sections. The first section is called Reimagine, and that's a word we've been using a lot at Afar lately. This pause in travel has allowed us all to think about how travel works, and we at Afar think it offers a chance for us to make travel better than it was before. Probably heard us say this on previous Afar Lives. Destinations have had the chance to think about how they manage visitors and how tourism affects locals. Other providers have had to figure out how to deal with the virus, but also had the chance to examine their impact on destinations. And travelers who have been forced to stay home have had a chance to reflect on how they move through the world. So for this first section of the magazine, that's what we'll be focusing on, the traveler. We have 3 writers doing essays that encourage readers to think about the kind of traveler they want to be. How do we maintain that appreciation for the little things that I think many of us have felt during lockdown? What does it mean to be a global citizen now after the entire world has shared this experience? How do we slow down and become a force for good in the places that we go? So some pretty big questions, but I think a lot of our readers are thinking about this stuff. And we know that Afar readers are kind of like travel role models, and they share this desire to be a positive influence on the world. So we want to help them do that. So that's what that first section is going to be about. The second section is going to be called Reconnect. I think a lot of us on this call would agree that travel is at its best when it builds bridges across cultures and allows us all to celebrate our common humanity. And so the stories in this section focus on people and on rebuilding those human connections that we've all been missing so much. That might happen over a glass of cider in the French countryside, or in a conversation with a craftsperson in a market, or talking with a taxi driver in Jamaica. Those are all the destinations where we'll be taking readers in that section. And then the third section is called Reveal. And this is our feature section with longer stories and big, beautiful photography. This part of the magazine is all about inspiration. We're focusing on 3 destinations that have been hit hard by the virus: Italy, China, and New York City. The China and Italy stories were actually reported before the virus hit, but they are all updated, and it's actually turns out to be a great opportunity to remind us all of how much of life happens beyond the headlines. At Afar, we often talk about taking people beyond the headlines, and that seems even more important now. It's so easy to get caught up in the news, but life is happening everywhere, and in so many ways, it is beautiful and worth celebrating, and we can't forget that. So we've often seen that as part of our mission at Afar, to open people's eyes to that and remind them of that, and it just seems like an even more valuable message to bring to the travel world right now. So we're really looking forward to sharing all of this with you and the rest of our audience, and reminding us all of the many reasons we have to be hopeful. And I will leave you with that and let these experts tell us about what's going on in their worlds.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's so inspiring. And I love that phrase or that term, travel role model. Who we look up to as travel role models. Can we be that? I love that. It's a great thing to think about. Thank you. Elliot, I wanted to open with you because you've seen a lot of changes, of course, over the past few weeks, but you're going to see more changes in the next few weeks as you start to open up even more safely. But what are you seeing in DC as far as a return to life and tourism? You're in a really great spot as one of the top drive markets. And I'd also love to know, how tourism supports DC, making it a big factor in recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think Jeremy made the comment about twists and turns. I think we've seen so many twists that we'd like to see a turn for the best. And we're recognizing and seeing that the traveling community, they're wanting to get out of the house. They want to get on the road. They're calling and asking questions about, what's open, what can you do in a city like Washington, which normally offers so many free things to see and do for those that are looking to travel. Washington is a city that has a large presence from the federal government, but when you look at the hospitality industry, there are about 79,000 people that work in hospitality in Washington, D.C. It's one of the top 5 fastest and largest economic engines for the city. And keep in mind, there are only 700,000 people that live in Washington, so it's not a very large city. People think that there are many, many more. So I think that what we're seeing right now, and I know that you all see the glare, but those are my windows in my 135-year-old building that show basically what's happening in Washington. And we're seeing people on the streets. We're seeing visitors coming to Washington right now, because the nice thing about what we have to offer and what's open is monuments and memorials. And you can absolutely socially distance when you're outside enjoying monuments and memorials. And, I'm seeing more and more individuals coming, riding bikes, and wanting to see more and more opening in the city. But equally as important, I'm seeing everyone wearing a mask and everyone using the protocol that's necessary to remain safe. So we're in stage 2 of opening, which means you can have groups of 50 or less. So therefore, about 50% of the occupancy of a restaurant can actually be used now, all outside dining. So it's exciting to see those things come back online. Some of the key assets are museums and theater and sporting events. We'll probably see some of the museums coming online later on, like in July and August. Some of them are already open, like the Spy Museum and the Museum of the Bible. So we're seeing a slow return to normalcy, if you will, in Washington, D.C., but it's going to be a long haul before we get back to where we were.
Yeah, and you'd said too, I mean, there's how many people live within 250 miles of DC?
There are about 50 million people. As we're looking at markets in which we're going to go after, we are going to go after that drive-in market. There's, for all of us who are still comfortable and have the confidence of getting on an airplane or getting on a train, we recognize the fact that so many won't have that confidence right now. So the point you're making to me, Annie, is that we are going to focus on that drive-in market,
Yeah.
and also offer protocol as to how to bring your car into the city and keep it safe during the pandemic.
Yeah. Well, that's good to hear about the museums as well. And the zoo, that's going to open soon. Has that been announced or?
Yeah, we're keeping our fingers crossed. We're looking. The zoo is a part of the Smithsonian. There are 16 free museums that includes the zoo, which is also free to those. So we're looking at hopefully 2 Smithsonians, one including the zoo that will include the zoo opening in the month of July. But we'll wait and see what happens as they're trying to figure that all out as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
To switch gears a little bit, Chris, can you, of course, give us an overview of where Seabourn is at right now? But of course, the cruise industry is in a waiting game. The CDC isn't being very forthcoming at all on dates to repeal the no sail warning. So how are you navigating this?
Yeah, great question. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. I'm actually coming virtually here from the Thomas Keller Bar, actually on Seabourn Ovation. Just wish that we were actually all on board right now, but sadly, as you say, we unfortunately can't. Clearly, unprecedented is probably one of the most overused words at the moment, but it has so much relevance, actually. These are really unprecedented times for the cruise industry, and to think we're entirely paused. And of course, Seabourn actually made the decision pretty early on to pause operations through to mid-October and early November. There's a different date, actually, Annie, because we paused through the end of the summer seasons for our 5 different ships. So whether that was in Alaska, the Mediterranean, Northern Europe, or Canada, New England. And so we actually have these different dates that we paused through to the summer. And we really made that decision, so thoughtfully, based upon, what our current occupancy actually was, actually what our cancellation rate was, looking at global airlift when, you look at Seabourn, we're a fly cruise product, and the reliance on obviously the global aviation industry is absolutely critical for us. And then we're looking at all the health and safety protocols, which of course, without saying, is our number one criteria to ensure the health and safety of not only guests, but obviously our crew, and of course of all destinations and the people in the destinations where we visit. And there's just a long list of factors that when we looked at them all together, we knew, unfortunately, we had to pause right through the summer, and we were, as I say, one of the first to do that. I think our travel advisor partners like Denise probably appreciated it, because doing all the work around 30-day pauses every 30 days isn't much fun. But obviously these are very, very, very difficult decisions. To the point of starting up, it's not necessarily going to be our decision. I think you summed it up pretty well in your question, Annie. The CDC and other government bodies and all the port authorities, we visit over 100 countries in the world, and nearly sail to close to 500 ports. And it's going to be the decisions around the opening and the protocols and the policies that will obviously allow us to return. But we are very hopeful. We're planning to return to the Caribbean. And I actually think that there is an incredible amount of pent-up demand for cruising, because we're seeing good, in fact, very good summer 2021 business with Alaska and Mediterranean, Northern Europe, all performing better than actually the same time last year, which certainly gives us great confidence. And of course, for all our loyal cruisers, they're certainly eager to use those FCCs and plan their future travels.
Yeah, and something we talked about, which I thought was wise, was, of course, there's all this conversation about health and safety, rightfully so. but you made the decision not to make any announcements now about, you might have to wear a face mask in November. And can you just walk us through that reasoning?
Yes, no, absolutely. And I will say we have huge respect of any brand, be it obviously a resort, land-based hotels, or fellow cruise line that actually is coming out with policies. That's obviously a decision if they wish to make. For ourselves at Seabourn, and guided by our parent corporation, Carnival Corporation as well, of course, we really are looking at the science around the pandemic, the data that we obviously have available to us, and again, back to the guidance that we're receiving from many different bodies, etc. And we're seeking a lot of guidance from, experts in the field. And we somewhat believe that we need to still take a little bit of time. I think we've seen over the last couple of weeks some great examples, actually, Annie, that I'll use an example. The World Health Organization made a statement on Monday, and less than 24 hours later, we were all reading that they were sort of taking back what they'd said.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think, fluid is another word we keep using. Dynamic is another word we keep using, but they're so relevant because it is fluid and dynamic. And we therefore have to take our time to determine what is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Seabourn are also small ultra luxury ships, and we have the most generous guest space ratio. All of our suites are obviously outside, full oceanfront suites, very generous again in size. So we don't know today whether the requirements for small ultra luxury ships are going to be the same as for a larger ship that carries obviously more people, still delivers a fantastic experience. We obviously visit different locations, hidden harbors, yachting playgrounds of the world. And will the requirements be the same in those destinations compared to larger ports? We know there will need to be some change. We're very, very prepared to obviously embrace all of that. Health and safety is our number one priority, always has been for over 30 plus years, always will be. But we just have to wait. One of the things we don't want to do is tell our guests today there's going to be 10 things they have to do when they start to sail with us, hopefully later this year. And then we find there's only actually 2 of those things that we need to do. So time is probably going to be on our side a little bit to make the right decision, Annie.
Yeah, and we already know so much more, right, than we did in March, and we're going to know much more in a couple of months. And
exactly, by next week maybe.
Hopefully, yeah. Crack the code by next week. So, and I also later on want to ask you about Seabourn Venture to get excited about cruising again, which has 2 custom built submarines, but I'll come back to you. Denise, you, I mentioned, of course, you have a huge agency. You focus primarily on corporate and business, which I think is so interesting, but you also do leisure. Can you talk first about the corporate bookings and what the general vibe is now? You have some really interesting clients in tech and science. Oh, you're muted. Sorry. There we go. I'll unmute you.
There we go. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well, we have a broad spectrum of customers, and they're across the nation, but they travel globally. So the impact has been severe to us. But we also have a large meeting and incentive piece of business, and we handle leisure as well, as you mentioned, Virtuoso. So I know the gentlemen that are there. And hi, Chris. Nice to see you again. And Elliot, it was interesting to hear what you have to say. I have customers that are based in Washington, D.C., and hey, Brett, and they use all of the products. So being interviewed recently, a few weeks ago, I said a few things that I think have even changed just over the few weeks, to Chris's point. Things are changing daily. And if you're watching the news, I'm based in California. California had one of their worst days in terms of an uptick. So my customers are relying on us oftentimes to tell them from a corporate perspective what they need to do and what's happening, and they're deciding almost on a daily basis what it is that they're going to do. We have the bioscience companies that sometimes have contracts with hospitals. They're considered essential. So they've been traveling from day one, although they've scaled back just to those essential travelers For example, we have customers that deal with cancer machines that are in hospitals that have to go. Technicians have to go. They have drug dispensing machines that are there. They must go. They're essential. So that's been going on. However, they have large facilities where doctors come for training, say in Las Vegas. They've closed those facilities down. They're just about to open them up. So they're telling us within the next 30 to 60 days, they'll be full on again, unless there's major flare-ups that are happening. The flip side of that is I have a sector of religious groups that travel. They travel primarily from the meetings and group side, but they do factor in as a corporate entity because they have they have travel that is deemed what we would consider normal corporate travel. And they have said they're not traveling until December.
Yeah.
At the earliest.
And I mean, on this at the same time too, I mean, you said you've seen the most uptick on the leisure side, right? Yes.
So leisure for us has come back the fastest. And when we first modeled this, unbeknownst to everybody tried to model their business all over financially, right? We modeled completely wrong, and I'm sure everybody else did. So we've had a few months in, and we've obviously tried to model, and we're pleasantly surprised to see that our modeling is financial models just a little bit further ahead. But we're modeling, just from month to month, just a small uptick every month, more realistically. And I'm hearing that most businesses are off between 5 and 15. They're operating at between 5 and 15% from a corporate perspective. And I'm seeing that they'll probably end between 40 and 50% by the end of the year, barring nothing major happens, or if the world comes back full on. And it also depends. What I'm hearing from my corporate customers is before yesterday, and the news that we were getting is that they're hopeful that from a corporate perspective that, we can get off of level 4 and get down to level 2. And as things are opening up in the world, that we're able to get back on and travel internationally. They were thinking would be second. Domestic travel would be first. Leisure travel, no doubt about it. They're ready to go. Yeah. Nobody in their house doesn't want a vacation right now, including me. We are all ready to go. And I'm not hearing as much fear about getting on planes. It's more about scheduling. Will the airlines have the schedules? And when the schedule permits, particularly West Coast to East Coast, and when we're talking about this middle seat availability, and it's not just for the next few months, because a lot of that's only guaranteed through September, for example, what happens beyond September, and what's going to happen with the airport. We, for example, as an agency, we set up our own COVID desk. We have a relationship with our corporate customers with daily information. It comes from all factors, and some of you that may know us know we've built a lot of technology. So all of you suppliers have done a fantastic job of putting information either on your site or you send it out. We created a central repository, and we have our own desk of advisors that are getting that information as needed to our clients. And I suggest that any advisors on the phone creates another sort of element, so you're not just firing emails all the time to customers, because they're inundated and they can't keep up, and the information changes, and it's easier for us to get it from you guys at a central repository site of some sort, or we can add it to ours, so it will be really easy at the fingertips of an advisor, so we can get it out to them.
Yeah, I mean, exactly what you're saying. That's also what we're seeing at Afar too with our digital coverage. Like we have articles that we're constantly updating and getting that kind of whiplash feeling about what is happening. And I think, so we had a question actually before that came in before that there's a fine line between hope and denial. And I'm hearing a lot of hope. And of course that, that there's also that we don't know a lot, right? That it could go either way in the next few months. But I'll come back. Sorry.
I said, we're hopeful.
Yes.
We're seeing right now, we're seeing a better trend moving forward than backwards. And we're seeing the bookings, we're seeing the demand for cruises, we're seeing the demand to get to cities. We're waiting for those zoos to open. We're seeing the hotels. We've actually sent some of our staff out, as we saw Mexico opening up. We sent some of our staff to go check things out that are willing to go. We're saying, go see for yourselves what it's like in those locations, and see if those hotels are consistently doing what they're doing in protocol. So then we can safely say to a customer, we can say to a customer, it is as safe as we're seeing and what they're saying. So we feel confident that behind our preferred suppliers that it's okay to recommend those properties. And I think that you guys should do it as well if you're able to do that. I think that's a good way. And then we could put it back on that COVID desk that we have, and we say we know that this location is good. We know that the restaurants are open and they're at this position, that type of thing.
Thank you so much. And I have other questions for you too, so I'll come back. But Brett, I'm laughing because when we talked earlier and you had talked about all the hopeful signs that you're seeing, I was like, really? Like, can I see some backup for that? Because, so can you talk a little bit about that, about, what you're seeing in your hotels, some trends?
Yeah, certainly, Annie. Thank you.
Yeah.
So obviously, as you know, with Kersner as Chief Commercial Officer, we have 3 brands that I oversee. So we've got the 2 Atlantis properties, the one in Dubai and also in Sanya. I have obviously the one and only portfolio, which you're probably the most familiar with. And I also have a casino resort in Morocco, just outside of Casablanca, called Mazagan. So now, evidence. Annie was challenging, I was actually not fabricating. So if we start sort of on the east side of the world, Wogan Valley in Australia, which has had a sort of bumpy old ride this year because it got caught up in bushfires in the part of the year. We managed to reopen it, and then of course it closed again. So we officially reopen Wogan Valley on the 1st of July. And we've actually had to restrict the number of reservations that we're now taking for July because the demand, and this is all domestic demand, because as you know, Australia has essentially put themselves in a bubble. I'm not even sure that they eventually didn't even open up to New Zealand. So all of our business that we're seeing into Wogan Valley is coming out of Sydney. Admittedly, it's only 40 rooms to fill, but the demand has been critically unprecedented in a positive sense, so we've actually had to cap because obviously, I mean, from the hotel business, as Chris will know from the cruise line, you're starting with a standing start. So it's one thing. Obviously, they were all operating hotels, now they're not. So our staff have been sitting at home for 3 months. You can't just all of a sudden throw the doors open, fill 100% and expect things to go like clockwork. So having a phased opening and also recognizing the new protocols that Denise was mentioning that we've had to adapt to. And as Chris said, they're all different by region. So yes, as one and only, we've got a bench line, which is already very high, but then there's certain nuances for each of our locations. So evidence proof point number 1, Annie, is that, Wogan Valley will open on the 1st of July, and demand through July and August right now is very, very strong. Staying in the sort of east side of the world, but with a different brand, Atlantis in Sanya. So perhaps a destination that not many people are that familiar with, because it's essentially an island off the coast of China, and it's really China for China. And we opened Atlantis there 2.5 years ago. It's a 1,300 room resort, and of course, China went into this situation a lot earlier than the rest of the world. But we're now running higher occupancies than we did same time last year. Slightly different demographics. So obviously Atlantis is, just as you're familiar with the Atlantis in the Bahamas, but it's ostensibly a family resort. But what we are seeing is that it's actually a younger demographic, and it's all couples that are coming through. So families are perhaps a little bit more resistant to traveling, and also thinking about how Chinese people travel, they tend to be more multi-gen when they travel. But we're seeing sort of more millennial type, late 20s, early 30s, but the resort is running better and higher occupancy this year than it did last year. And since we reopened that's going really great.
Well, and then you have the Maldives opening, you said, right? July 15th?
Yes. Well, this was to Denise's point. I was on a panel earlier this week, and literally half an hour before the announcement came out from the Maldivian Tourism Board that they're going to open from the, oh my God, let me make sure I get this right, the 15th of July. The Maldives will be open for tourists, which is so exciting. But we've seen, and I was reviewing actually this afternoon with my digital team the search, what people have been, nationalities that are visiting our websites and what they've been searching for. And Maldives has been the #1 searched, well, first of all, in Google, Maldives and Greece, the two top searched international destinations in the US right now.
That's so interesting.
And I can corroborate that because when I reviewed my web stats, it was the US that was our #1 source of web visitation for Maldives. And we are looking at strong forward back quarter, so October, November, December is pacing ahead of the same time last year. I'm confident that Maldives will come back strongly.
Wow. Well, and we're seeing, of course, a lot of interest for Europe. So I think that's, Greece is covered in that. And I think that might be also because there's been a lot of talk about Greece maybe being open to Americans before the rest of Europe, but we'll see. Not yet. So awesome. And I'll come back to you too. But Elliot, you are also the chair of the U.S. Travel Association, which of course promotes the industry. What are you seeing overall? Of course, how important it is, the importance of foreign visitors, and any insight into domestic recovery?
Yeah, with U.S. Travel Association, their key priorities would be mostly international visitation, economically, stay longer, spend more. We love the international visitor. And of course, lobbying down the street here, Congress, on key issues specific to our industry. So right now, one of the key things in which they're focusing on is that our organization, we are 501c6, like most destination management organizations are. We have not received, or are we eligible for funding under the CARES Act that's been in place by Congress. So as you can imagine, one of my key priorities is to try to influence those that are on the Hill to change that, because we need the financial wherewithal to get back on track to promote our destinations. The point you're making is that, we talked about the fact that the 50 million people that live within 250 miles of Washington, we know that the domestic market is probably going to see some degree of recovery a lot faster. And as Denise referenced, as we look at the corporate market, once we start seeing the federal government opening a little bit more, you'll see more corporate travel coming into Washington. The international traveler for us, it's going to be a long time in the U.S. before we're able to realize the numbers that we were receiving or hosting prior to COVID. So, we're anticipating 12 to 18 months in terms of recovery or longer, which is unfortunate. So, if you've been watching the news, it doesn't take rocket science to figure out if Europe chooses to close its borders to American visitors.
We just
what that would mean.
Actually, yeah.
I'm sure, and that concerns us. And to the point being made, we recognize. That's why I made the point about safety in Washington D.C. The fact that we're made up of 50 states and the District of Columbia, they're all basically kingdoms, if you will, within themselves, and each one makes their own rules. And unfortunately, some of those things will backfire. We're hoping that the residual effect will not be the inability to travel internationally both ways, because that's going to be very important, even though we realize that it would still take 12 to 18 months for it to recover. So for us, with the U.S. Travel Association, it's really focusing on the fact that right now, as we're in a process of figuring out what we will do with our furloughed employees and trying to keep the lights on, at some point when we're able to open back up, we will not have the financial wherewithal to do the marketing and promotion that we need to be doing. That's why we exist. So, U.S. travel has been extremely important in that particular area, as well as some of the key priorities tied to tourism and other markets for Washington and the rest of the U.S.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I did just want to touch on that because it has been in the news hugely the past couple of days about especially the EU-US ban. And of course, all of us feel that. I want my parents to come visit my daughter. It means a lot to a lot of people. But, and someone just said, I fear Europe will be out of reach along with so many other places for travelers in the US. And I think right now, we just don't know, right? I mean, there could be a breathalyzer test that you get tested in 10 seconds, right? That comes out in the next 2 months, right? I just read about it in Israel. They invented it, right? So we don't know, right? How you can shut off borders. What are the ramifications of that? So I think that's, if you're perfectly healthy, how can you show that you can travel? I think there's a lot that's going to happen in the next month or so that we just don't know yet. And we're living in the news right now, which is very negative, right? But I don't think that's going to be long-term at all. It can't be.
No, we're hoping that you're right, Annie. We are really wanting to get back on track. A city like Washington, as you look at all the reasons and all the things that we have to offer, it's really in place, like in most cities, for visitors. I mean, for our local community as well. So it is very discouraging to see them shuttered and really looking forward to that visitation coming back to the city. The inverse of that is that because we've been so careful here and wearing masks and we're seeing declines in COVID cases, we're also concerned about other parts of the U.S. coming here. As you've seen in other, in places like New York, they're literally requiring other parts of the U.S. and those coming to those cities to quarantine for 14 days. So I feel like we're taking steps backwards here in terms of the progress. But we still see in Washington some positive feedback or desire for those to get back on the road and travel, and that's kind of what we're banking on. And
I also think too, I mean, me being in London, I'm probably a little more positive just because of what is happening in Europe. And, even I said this, I think last time or the time before, eight weeks ago, I was like, I'm not going to Italy for a really long time. Like seeing the pictures of the, Northern Italy, nope, that's okay. And now I'm like, all right, I'll go tomorrow, right? Because I think our minds have the ability to change quite quickly with new information. So
right. And fortunately for us, we're seeing advances in the science, which no one on this screen can control what's happening. We're really, really relying on medicine and science, and they're giving us optimism by saying there'll be a vaccine by the end of this year, if not sooner, and we hope that that's the case.
Yeah. Thank you, Elliot. So Chris, too, I think, how do we bring the cruise lines out of this overall? There is a lot of nuance in cruising. Not every line is the same. But when we talked, you had something interesting to say too about, self-reporting allows for targeting, and can you talk about that? And also, the health of the travel advisor industry being directly correlated with the health of the cruise industry, and why you support them so much as we recover.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I'll start with that point because our travel advisor partners are just so critical, always have been, always will be. I think I said, Annie, to you, the health of the global cruise industry is reliant, on the health of the travel advisor, and actually probably vice versa as well. We've enjoyed an amazing relationship, and we will continue to enjoy a really healthy, amazing relationship, in the future. I actually want to pick up a little bit also about something we're all saying, and that is also about how people do want to get back to travel, and I think it plays into the question you've also asked about what do we do, with the cruise industry. We obviously, I think we've all been doing our surveys, and we have surveys all of our guests every single week, and we've seen sentiment change, and there was a tipping point actually around early May where we started to see that guests, past guests, and actually prospects started to want to receive promotional information. Tell me where I need to be thinking about going. Not tomorrow necessarily, but in the future.
Get me out of my house.
Get me out of my house, exactly. And I say we're all dreamers, yes? Everybody dreams of travel. I would challenge anybody who says they don't to say, I think you do, even if it's just a sort of a staycation or something. We're all dreamers. But I think what we've seen is people are shifting into that planning stage, and that's exciting. Where should we think of going when all this is finished? One of my colleagues used the expression "revenge spending," and I think it's actually a good statement to sort of say, I'm going to spend some dollars and get out of here, when we absolutely can. But we are now seeing, these planners shift to bookers, and of course that will eventually become travelers. And so we're seeing the chain really starting. And I think obviously to get the cruise industry, going again, we need the support of the bodies and the governments, the institutions. We do believe, yes, that perhaps the cruise industry was unfairly, spoken of at various times during the last, 4 months or so. And, we don't like looking back in the rearview mirror. We like to look forward. But one thing I will say about the cruise industry and looking back is the cruise industry's always had incredibly high standards for health and safety. Again, not only for guests, but for crew in the destinations where we visit. We have hospitals on board, doctors, nurses. We've had extra, sinks to be able to wash your hands before you go into restaurants, sanitizing, the way we've actually deep cleaned ships. The reason why the cruise industry is allowed to become under such a spotlight is because we do report. If somebody is ill, if they just have an influenza, but they've gone to the hospital and seen the doctor, we report that. And there's no other part of the travel industry, hospitality industry that actually does report in the same way. So it puts certain optics on, but I think everybody needs to then sort of distill that down to sort of say, well, actually, the cruise industry is an incredibly safe option for a wonderful vacation. And of course, most of our guests, Brett, you'll love to know, they always stay in hotels before they stay on our beautiful floating hotel, our floating resort. So, we support the entire industry. We support the destinations we go. We support the airline industry, the hotel industry. Most of our guests take private car and drive. Many guests take private jet travel as well. And I think that's going to grow. We're actually seeing, we have a product, actually, Annie, I don't want to sell, but we have a product called Seaborne Private Air. And we've seen the number of requests for quotations for Seaborne Private Air actually increasing. And again, I think it just comes back to maybe for some, small has some level of, maybe it's a little safer. But again, I don't think that's a one size fit all. I think, there'll be plenty of people that want to get to the Atlantis and have fun. There'll be plenty of people that want to sail on a larger 4,000 plus passenger ship because of the excitement that it can bring. So we've got to get everybody back to travel. And I'll finish my comment where I started with the travel advisors, because the travel advisors are a huge, powerful collective voice. And if they can harness that voice positively and say the cruise industry needs to be allowed to start and the governments need to support the cruise industry, it will have a positive effect. And actually, hats off to Zane Kirby, the CEO of Asta, who did write a very thoughtful letter, and I think others are following. And let's hear that collective voice and do all of our part.
Absolutely. I mean, that letter you're mentioning, it's if anyone hasn't read it, it's really wonderful and really supports it. And he's doing such a great job advocating for the whole industry, but cruises as well. I did get a question, not to give you more work, Chris, but this woman's wondering, you bring up a lot of great points, wondering if Seaborne has these, these bullet points on what makes it one of the safest vacation options somewhere in a PDF to share with clients or travelers.
Absolutely. No, we can definitely send our why Seaborne information, and obviously why all of our travel advisors and their guests certainly consider a cruise vacation. Not a problem. Yeah. Take the challenge.
Yeah. Thank you. I know you're sitting around doing nothing, so I just want to
we'll add it to our 14-day 7-day-a-week jobber.
Denise, I wanted to ask you, you talked about, of course, leisure coming back. Where do people want to go? Where do they want to go the most? Or where are they booking? Oh, sorry, I'm going to unmute you. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that. I keep thinking I'm unmuted. First, can I go back to Chris for a moment? Thank you for giving the plug to ASTA. I'm on ASTA's executive board, and I also chair the Corporate Advisory Council, which is the corporate arm of ASTA as well. And ASTA's been doing phenomenal work. And, hats off to Zane. The team has done exceptional work up on the Hill. Elliot, I'm sure you're aware of that as well, but they've done just incredible work. And I know that we're working with a couple of lobby firms right now out there fighting for our entire industry. It's not just for one particular sector, but for all bodies in this industry. And if you guys are not a part of ASTA, you should be. I don't care what you do in this industry, but go take a look at their website and see what's happening and join, because we're at war right now, and we should all be a part of it. So I just had to say that. So where are people wanting to go? Anywhere and everywhere. And I think that's what's happening. A lot of cruise, people do want to cruise, despite what you may be hearing both sides of the stories. I'm afraid to cruise. I won't get on a ship. That's not true, people. They want to go. There's pent-up demand, and they're looking for deals that are out there. I think frustration is happening of when that will be. We've had a lot of people book recently, and they get frustrated with things being pushed back in terms of opening. When is that really going to be? So, Chris, to your point, we should band together and say it should be soon, because I think that we're worried that it's going to get pushed back so much that they may look for an alternative, which means we won't lose a customer, but you might. And other cruise lines may feel the same. Lots of domestic trips. I get sometimes frustrated with the news where they say, don't fly, drive. And it's great for my car partners if they rent a car, but not so great if they don't, because that means they're getting in their own vehicles and they're driving. Great for some hotels, but not necessarily all the hotels that would be our normal suppliers. And I then worry about consistency with hotels when we have no control over where that might be. Yeah, right, exactly. So we lose sight of them. Duty of care comes into play, and then they call us when they get into trouble, when they plan something on their own. So that's a concern of ours as well. And then they call back for information Elliot might have, Elliot, who's going to take great care of them when they're in places like DC is a great destination. They want to take advantage of all the wonderful things we all know that DC has. And if you don't know, you should be calling Elliot and finding out about it. But that's one of the great destinations. But a lot of international people want to go to Europe. They want to go to Hawaii, but they don't want to deal with the 14-day quarantine right now. Mexico.
Wasn't that just today? We just talked about it on Afar's channel, is that you can show negative.
Probably today. I haven't even talked to my office. Probably today. So I know that was a pent up. Yeah, that was a pent up destination for a long time for us. A lot of Tahiti for us. People are looking to go remote. They think that if they go somewhere remote, which I think was what was happening with the Maldives, and as far away as they can get with something tropical, something beachy, we're getting a lot of that. I have people mad over, not being able to get to Tahiti and some of these other places where things were postponed, but they still want to go. Europe is huge for us. And now this thing with Europe and the EU, I had one customer said, when did we become the third world country? I said, when we couldn't get our 50 states to unite and be consistent with whatever we're supposed to be doing. And to Elliot, your point earlier, if we break out and we become all these 50 little kingdoms because we're forced to, until we get that together, I'm not sure what we're going to do. But again, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we can figure it out because we'll need to. But I think that, again, Europe is huge. Portugal is a big one. Egypt was really hot, not the weather, but the destination. But now we have to put Egypt on hold. Dubai's always been popular. But people
so basically everywhere.
Everywhere's hot.
Everywhere that's open. Yeah.
We're hearing more. I was talking to Ellen the other day, more about separate vacations with spouses, girls trip, boys trip, or boy trip, whatever.
Advisors are not just travel advisors, right? They're relationship advisors. And
relationship advisors. People are a little tired of being together as a family, maybe want to separate as a family for a little while. So whatever works.
Awesome. Thank you. And Brett, with that, can you talk about your new openings? Because you had Rwanda late last year, and now you have some other incredible properties opening, which are still opening, despite everything that's happening.
So at the end of last year, we opened our second property in Rwanda, which was Gorilla's Nest, which was obviously Rwanda, and I don't need to tell this panel or this audience, Rwanda was absolutely the hot destination for 2020. So we opened into great tailwinds and great success and have amazing forward pace. Just on the note of Rwanda, so that's obviously one and only Gorilla's Nest, and the second resort, which is one and only Nyungwe. The interesting thing is that the national parks are open in Rwanda. The hotels aren't, you can't actually get there, but you can go trekking with a gorilla if you can figure out how to go there. Additionally, in terms of new openings for this year, we have our first one and only in Europe, which is one and only Montenegro, which will open on the 1st of October. That will feature our first Cheneau spa. So Henri Cheneau, which is extremely well known for his wellness retreats in Milan and Baku, we will be having a full Cheneau experience in that property. So we're very excited to have our first footing in Europe. Closer to this audience is a very exciting opening in Mexico, which is one and only Mandarina. And that's opening on the 1st of November, and I think will be probably one of the most exciting resorts. And I'm not biased, but it'll be one of the most exciting resorts to open this year and even into 2021. It's a super sexy resort just north of Punta Mita, and set in a beautiful tropical, lush forest on a cliffside. Very, very unique experience, and a unique treehouse villa product that we'll bring to market. And then coming a little bit closer is, in time at least, on the 6th of September, we're opening our first one and only in Asia, which is one and only Desaru Coast, which is at the tip of Malaysia, very close to Singapore, which we're predominantly for staycation business out of Singapore and Malaysia. So despite all of the challenges that we've been facing this year, we've been able to push on and opening 3 hotels, in addition to reopening all of the existing portfolio. So myself and my team, and in fact, all of us are going to be incredibly busy as the year unfolds ahead of us.
Oh, that's very exciting. And again, I'll look for your backup to make sure that you're
yeah, my proof points. I don't forget, Annie.
I'll need you to prove that. No, but it is really good to hear. And I think, everyone on the call seems to be experiencing the same thing. It's just frustration with borders that aren't open, confusion, overwhelming information changing every day. There was a question about how do we sell international or, talk about international travel when we can't assure that the flights are reliable returning to the US. Ellen and I were talking earlier about, 2021 is there, right? I think that's, people are dreaming and planning for 2021. So that's happening. But Denise, do you have any insight into that as to what you would tell someone, like how do you sell international right now? Not knowing.
I did before yesterday. So
yeah.
I think we just take it one day at a time. I know we do 70% international on the corporate side. And I would say that we just have to figure out what's happening. We're staying close to our airline partners to make sure the scheduling is there. That's probably the biggest piece besides safety. Safety being number one, and making sure that we can get into those countries. Obviously, if you're a corporate traveler, you have your passport, you have your global entry, and you make sure all of that is up. Don't forget that as we're sitting at home and we're taking care of all these conference calls and forgetting about not being a road warrior. I have to remind people, somebody said the other day, oh, I forgot all about my global entry. You can do that versus your passport. Passport offices, we're hoping that they'll get back on track soon, but people are forgetting about global entry. So please take care of that. If you get the email, do it. They are behind as well. But the countries, pay attention, work with your travel advisor, make sure what's happening. The countries are starting to open. And
watch people who are traveling, right? I think that's people who can travel.
Yeah. There's a lot of information from your travel companies. We're a BCD affiliate. They've been giving us great information on airports and things like that. And we're able to pass that out to our customers right away. They're even giving little maps with little checkpoints telling you, here's what to expect at this particular airport. If you can get your hands on things like that, it's great. So be proactive. That will give you a reason to talk to those customers and stay engaged. Our account management team is talking to them weekly. Our meetings and incentive, we have a whole meetings and incentive division. We've had to figure out how to deal with Elliot, you were talking about your particular city. You're at that stage where you're 50 and below. So, meetings that are above that. I know ASTA, we had our global convention that was supposed to happen in August, and we had to cancel that because we go way above that size. We're over 1,000 people usually. And so we're going to have a virtual event until we can get to some of our smaller events. So we've had to adjust with those types of customers as well. So it's just a matter of staying in terms of communication, and international is the same thing. But mostly you've got to figure out if the planes are going to be flying there and the country's going to let us in.
Exactly. Day to day. I'm still waiting. I have this trip to Spain. We'll see if they let me in.
They're going to let you in.
Yeah.
They're going to let you in.
So really quick, go around. Where do you want to go tomorrow? I want to go to Rasika for Indian food in DC. Where do you want to go tomorrow if you travel tomorrow? Chris?
Where would I love to go tomorrow? If I could, I'd probably love to fly to Mykonos, Santorini, the Greek Isles, board the Seabourn Odyssey, and have an amazing Greek vacation. Why not?
Amazing. That's what people are searching for, apparently. Jeremy, where do you want to go?
I was actually supposed to be in Kenya and Tanzania right now, so that's where I would go. I'd pick up the trip that I was supposed to be taking right now.
Elliot, what about you?
I'd love to go to the Bahamas. My dad's from there. I love Atlantis. Brett, I've seen the property in Sanya, which is under, no one knows about Sanya except for folks
You were the
in
American
the world. Yes, I stayed at the Addition, but it is incredible. I checked it out while it was being built. So I'd say Paradise Island, Bahamas, right now. Yeah, Atlantis.
Denise?
I'm coming to see you, Annie. We already talked about it.
Yeah, exactly. You're gonna have tea. We're gonna have tea together.
That's right.
Perfect. Brett?
Well, I am actually going to come and see you because I'm booked.
Exactly. Your kids.
So 3 days ago, Dubai announced that residents can travel, so I booked. And so on the 10th of July, I'm flying to London to see my kids who I've not seen since February. So I'm see you there, Annie.
Exactly. The pubs are
So
lit.
I'll come to visit you.
And Ellen, I'll leave it with you to close.
So I was supposed to be leaving for Italy today for a 2.5-week holiday. So that's not happening, obviously, but I am getting on my first flight to the West Coast to hit the wine country on Tuesday. So I'm very excited about that. Then I have the Caribbean in August. And just for a little more hope, we had a sip and sail this week, and next year hopefully it's going to be Seabourn, Chris, but we are scheduled to do a river cruise for Afar audience, and that is scheduled for November 2nd in Amsterdam, going down the Rhine to Basel, and we just got 2 more bookings this week. So I would say that, although we're not sure where we can go and when we can do it and how it's going to happen, clearly there's pent-up demand and optimism that we will be able to navigate. And we just finished our 2nd survey at Afar. We've been monitoring our audience for both content and to provide for our partners more insight. And it hadn't changed much over the month that we surveyed, where a continual 2/3 continue to book and plan right now. So as Annie said earlier, whether it's 2021 or this year, interestingly, they shifted some of the destinations where now they are, adding back in some of the destinations that were not available to them a month ago. So they're very much paying attention to where they can travel, and that's where they're saying they will travel first. So if anyone wants any of that survey detail on the call, please do let us know at Afar, and I'm happy to share it. And then, just lastly, I love, Jeremy talking about how, taking people beyond the headlines. It's something that we all desire and we all need. And I am very hopeful that we will continue to move around the world. And the more one of us do it, the more all of us will do it. So in the meantime, build your immune system, because this is something we all need to focus on. So I know Brett and I talk about this all the time, and Chris knows me well, as do many of you on the call, but building your immune system will allow you to travel the world without as much fear as those who do not have a strong immune system. So I will leave you with that hope and look forward to seeing you on July 9th, which is our next live chat. We will take the break for July 4th week. So wishing you all a great July 4th for those who celebrate it, and look forward to more together. Thank you. Thanks, Annie.
Hope to see you
Thanks,
guys in
Ellen. Thank you.
person.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.